So in Yoga Nidra, what we are doing is attaining a state of consciousness that is what's called in the yogic scientific literature a hypno-yogic state. So it's not hypnosis, but it's not pure active consciousness. It is a very dormant awakeness, if that kind of makes sense, right? You're in this trance. And so in that trance, you're in the edit mode for your unconscious mind. So this is where a sankalpa comes in. So a sankalpa is a resolve that you put in there. And then I don't know how to explain this except in this way. So when I work with a patient who has anxiety and they have this subconscious programming, when we have a therapeutic breakthrough, which there's tons of evidence for, right? So even Freud noticed this, that you have to activate the emotion in psychotherapy. Like my patient that I talked about a while ago who was like, comes in, he talks about how he's depressed, didn't do shit for him. What we have to talk about is why he's angry, how he's been screwed in life, all the people that he's angry. So then once that emotional energy activates, we become one-pointed, we activate that energy in the unconscious, and then if we vent it out, it disappears. That's how you burn away the things, by letting them out.
And in Nidra, is there an opportunity for emotion? It's a deeply relaxed but mind-active state.
No, yeah. So you don't want emotion in Nidra. You are actually, so emotion collapses a scattered mind to one point. But there is a state of consciousness even beyond one-pointedness that we use in studying, where if you talk to people who like engage in not even the flow state, but beyond the flow state. So there are people who like the best, I know it's going to sound hokey, but people who like channel divinity. That I think divine is the best scientific term. So there are some human beings, and everyone has experienced this, where like you're not you, you're like something else.
Tell me more.
I think the Greeks thought of genius is not a person, is like something you channel.
Something coming through somebody.
Something coming through.
We see this, I think, most readily in musicians.
Musicians, athletes, right? So there's sometimes, like I work with like esports athletes, and some of them know that they're going to win. They see the game that they're going to play, and they know exactly what's going to happen. And the crazy thing, it's not a calculation, it's an intuition. I'm sure that on some level they're calculating. So we call this stuff divine. I'm not saying it's divine. I'm not saying it comes from God. I'm saying that the subjective experience is qualitatively fundamentally different from like a regular logical experience. So this is a state of mind that is even beyond emotion. It's in the edit mode. And scattered mind, emotion brings us down to some amount of focus, but then there's even a level of focus that's deeper.
And that's where the rewriting comes from.
That's where the rewriting comes in.
Yeah.
And then when you implant something there, that's what a sankalpa is. So when you do Yoga Nidra, the physiologic element, so this is what's like not bad, but is a necessary step with where we are with science. All the weird mystical stuff I think is real, but we have to start with the basic science, right? So the way that science works is like we start with, okay, like let's look at cortisol production. And then let's look at what happens next. And let's look at what happens next. And let's look at what happens next. So Yoga Nidra, whether you're talking about cardiac coherence breathing, so there's the first stage of what we call Nadi Shuddhi Pranayam, which is alternate nostril breathing. But then there's a text called Vashishtha Samhita, which talks about a particular kind of cardiac coherence breathing with a ratio of 1 to 4 to 8. So you breathe in for 8 seconds. Actually, you breathe in for 16 seconds. You hold for 64 seconds. And then you exhale for 32 seconds. If you do the Vashishtha Samhita version of cardiac coherence breathing, the subjective experience is completely different. You will feel prana. You will feel chi.
With that pattern of breathing.
With that pattern of breathing.
Those are long inhales, holds, and exhales.
Yeah. So it's hard to get to. But like literally the subjective experience that you will have is like a sense of vibration on like at the periphery of your body. That's what it feels like to me.
If I may, just a brief editorial about why I also believe that science needs to go down through the physiological first. My lab has done some clinical studies on breathwork. We called it respiration physiology for a reason. It's important to be able to fund studies and also to be able to communicate that information to colleagues who, if they just hear breathwork or meditation or it's it's a separator, right? The field of science can't go into the mystical right away. But
Yeah.
what's so interesting is nowadays there are discussions about meditation that are starting to get into the deeper layers, but it took 20 years or more of formal science to do. I'm not arguing with you.
Yeah,
I think some people will say, why not just cut to the chase?
No.
You know,
I mean,
I completely agree with everything you're saying. I think there are ways of editing the nervous system that are non-pharmacologic, that are behavioral. You're describing some of the more ancient ones. I do believe the yogis were and are neuroscientists. They come in through a different avenue. My recollection from Nidra is that there's an encouragement to two things that I would love your comments on. One is there's an instruction in the Nidras that I've done to move away from thinking and doing to being and feeling. You're trying to get out of the state of planning, there's some shift that's critical. And then the other one is I am statements. There's this instruction to give, talk about one's deepest heart's desire as if it's already happened. Is that BS?
No, it's not BS,
real?
but we have to understand mechanisms. So let me talk about the science bit for a bit. I have not simpler. I'm a clinician. I think there's a reason we have to start with physiology, because when a patient comes into my office, if I tell them do Yoga Nidra, what is the effect size of the intervention? We need to know that, right? So here's the problem with studying meditation and the benefit of studying meditation this way. The problem is that we're teaching people to swim for 8 weeks. That does not show us what an Olympic athlete is. So our science of meditation is in its infancy. The reason why this is really important is because not everybody is a Buddha. So the reason we have to start with physiology is because we're doing scientific studies to make predictions. Why are we making predictions? At least for me, it's to help a human being. So I don't care that there's some yogi who's been in the cave in the Himalayas for 60 years and attained some weird channeling of divinity. What I want to know is, like, when a human being comes into my office and I tell them to meditate, how much can I pull back on their SSRI if they've been sticking with the practice? Right? So you have to start. Science is about reliability, not about possibility. That sounds so new age, but it's about what we can reliably predict. And that's a really important place to start. Going back to the Nidra thing, this is the thing to understand. So if you think about planning is a higher order cognitive function that depends upon other baser cognitive functions. And I'll just give you a simple example. If I care about parties, my mind will automatically plan parties. If I care about avoiding other people, I will automatically plan how to avoid other people. So the planning that you do is whatever, but which things are you planning? That comes from the deeper stuff, for lack of a better term. That's why, so these people, they're not doing the sankalpa in the most classic form, but they're getting there. Because a being statement is the pluripotent stem cell of where you want to go. Okay, so what do I mean by that? It's like, let's be precise. And I know it sounds new agey, but there's science here. Okay, so let's look at something like self-esteem. So self-esteem is an assessment of yourself. And think about all of the ways, if I have high self-esteem or low self-esteem, that will result in so many different, manifestation, it's the word, right? That will manifest in your life in so many ways. How do you respond to feedback? If someone asks too much of you, can you set a boundary? And this is the problem. The core of the work that I try to do is I try to help people get to their fundamentals. Everyone's focused on changing behavior. Everyone's focused on increasing willpower to overcome this tendency. And it's like, why not just change the tendency? And that sounds so simple, but that's literally what we do in psychotherapy every day. When we come in and someone has a narcissistic personality disorder, Andrew, this is personality. This is who they are. And we can psychotherapize them to be someone else, for their natural thoughts to change, for the way that they see the world to change, for their behaviors to change on its own. It doesn't require willpower is necessary when you are trying to not be narcissistic. It is not necessary when you are no longer narcissistic.